Okay, so as Joni said, I founded this organization in 2014. That is my son, Matt, in that picture there. He was 12, or he was 13 years old then. And you can't tell by that image. He looks so happy, but like he was in the middle of a really horrible crisis then. He just showed up that day and he was there, but the next week he kind of broke down. So I like to show that because we just never know, when the school says, oh, they look okay, they look great in school, they're masking, obviously. And these are just our other resources. We have free information on our website. We have classes and my book. And we also have a parent peer-to-peer support group for school avoidance families that they really love, because one of the worst things about having school avoidance is feeling stigmatized and isolated. So it's really cool to have people who understand you finally. So school attendance problems, school avoidance is only one of 5 major attendance problems, even though schools will lump everything into truancy. So I'll talk about school avoidance in a second, but we have school exclusion when the schools suspend or exclude our kids, usually because of absenteeism, which is a horrible catch-22. School withdrawal, it's parent motivated usually. Either they need the child to go to work or stay at home and take care of a loved one. And we have the truancy, which is unexcused absences, which are concealed from the parents. And then life, transportation issues, clean clothing, life issues that definitely get in the way. So what is school avoidance and what are the characteristics of it? So school avoidance is an emotional driven, fear-based response to something happening to go to school, which is causing this child severe emotional distress. So obviously they're refusing to, well, avoiding attending school. It can start slowly and build over the years, or sometimes it might just come up really quickly. Usually when that happens, usually bullying is involved, but every school avoidance case follows its own trajectory. For these kids, it is uncontrollable, paralyzing. They don't want to feel this way, so it's really difficult for them and us. They feel obviously distressed, and the parents are usually trying and know where their kids are. So the parents know that the kid is usually in the house, unfortunately, as opposed to truancy when it's concealed from the parents. And the parents might not know what's happening because school avoidance, as you probably have realized, is not really well advertised, or there's not great awareness around it. So oftentimes it might be happening and you don't even realize. And the absences obviously can start and gradually build. So what does school avoidance look like in a child? Well, it's really scary. It varies obviously among different kids, but what I saw, and I just saw a video of another parent on our school avoidance group, was when I went in the morning to get my son for school, he was hiding under his covers. And I would say, oh, it's time to go to school. And he wouldn't speak. And, I'd raise my voice, it's time to get to school, da, da, da. And then you get really frustrated and you might try to pull the covers over or you might yell, which is the worst. But of course, it's a natural inclination. And a lot of us make that rookie mistake. And it's really scary. And they might be hiding. They might have outbursts and they might refuse to get out of the car at drop off. That's often a very stressful situation. So it can look like many things, but it's very scary when it happens to you and you really don't know what's going on. And it looks and feels like defiance, but these kids are not defying you. They don't want to disappoint you. The operational definition of school avoidance, according to Berg's criteria, which is what the clinicians will use and researchers, is school attendance less than 80% during 2-week period, presence of an anxiety disorder, parents are aware of the child's whereabouts, the absence of a conduct disorder, and the parents are motivated and they're trying to get their kids back to school. So what is the why behind the school avoidance? What is causing it? So obviously we've heard of anxiety, mental health issues. It can be a spectrum of different emotional, behavioral health issues, obviously social anxiety, depression, trauma, OCD, PTSD. It ranges. I always was interested in Berg's criteria when they said it has to be a presence of an anxiety disorder. I don't know if I believe that, but usually it is an anxiety disorder. It could be from an undiagnosed learning difference, like if your child has ADHD and you don't know it and they're struggling in school or they're avoiding school. I mean, it kind of makes sense because they feel like in school they're so lost and they're confused. Why can't they keep up? And even if they are diagnosed with a learning difference, but the school is not giving you the proper support, which happens a lot, that is also a cause for school avoidance. The lack of connections between kids and adults. Every kid in school needs to have a safe adult, someone they feel comfortable with, at least one, which is a problem we have in our schools. Transitions from elementary, intermediate, middle school, transitions for moving, different teachers, changing expectations as the workloads change. We've seen also this happens a lot. Kids who are in elementary or intermediate school have no problem with their schoolwork because it comes easy to them. And then middle school, when the workload is really ramped up, it all of a sudden feels like, what? I don't know how to study. I never had to study. So what's going on? And they feel like something is wrong with them. Bullying, obviously, and school-related factors, which in the past was not mentioned at all. We were just talking about, oh, there's a problem with the kid, problem with the parent. So thank gosh that the researchers started admitting this and plowing into this, that yes, there are school-related factors involved. And it could be a number of these different issues. And schools, unfortunately, don't realize that a lot of it is because of them, which is also an issue, which we definitely try to explain to school districts. And usually these are all co-occurring issues. And it's not that easy sometimes. Sometimes it's complex. It can be a few different things. So school avoidance follows that traditional anxiety, fear, avoidance cycle. So if you think about school avoidance, when the kid feels worry and panic when you walk in the room in the morning to get them out of bed and they know they have to go to school. And then they are avoiding, they are hiding from you. And maybe the parent will then go away because they've tried, they've screamed, they've gone in the room back and forth and nothing's happening. And the child feels, wow, that temporary relief. I survived, I don't have to go to school. So they're, whew. But then as the day goes on and they see 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they have the resurgence of their worry and panic, realizing this is going to happen again. And this cycle is a loss of confidence and a lack of coping. So we have to break the cycle of avoidance. School-related factors, I'll just mention some of them. Obviously, sensory issues, school culture or climate, executive functioning and planning and prioritizing issues, and unstructured time. There's just a lot of things related to school that can be upsetting our kids. These are just more general aspects of school-related. And some facts. So the kids, unfortunately, a lot of them, which really stinks, they can't explain what's going on, which makes it more difficult. And you have to become the investigator, the sleuth, and try to reach out to their teachers and figure out what is going on underneath everything, because they might not be able to tell you, unfortunately. And we obviously know there's a stigma. Parents feel blamed. They don't speak about this to their friends. Most people don't understand it. So it's very isolating. And then on top of that, if the school doesn't understand, you'll feel gaslit in a way because you're like, oh my God, am I seeing things differently? Like none of my friends understand, the school doesn't understand. So a lot of families who are dealing with, well, most all the families feel this way as well. And a small percentage of kids with school avoidance actually have oppositional defiance disorder. And a lot of the times it's misdiagnosed at the beginning, especially if someone is not aware of school avoidance and they label a defiance right away. And a lot of the times we see those diagnoses change. The prevalence of school avoidance, unfortunately, I have all these different figures because there really is not one good indicator of really what's going on in America or the world. The latest research I found that one of the most prolific gentlemen on school avoidance Dr. what's his name, Heine from Amsterdam, I asked him, hey, what do you think it is? And he's like, well, the meta-analysis before COVID was that this was 1 to 7%. So we know it's grown since then. Other studies say 2 to 5%. Another study says 5 to 28% along the life of a school-age child. But it really is, I think it's between 7 and 10% based on what I hear and hear from families all the time and from schools. And it's just not going away. And the reason it's not going away, unfortunately, is because usually schools don't understand it or see it. So they are not intervening early, and you might not know what's going on. It presents fairly equal across socioeconomic, racial, gender. I know that obviously marginal communities are more at risk for not getting help or having schools have bias against them, which happens a lot, where the schools feel that these parents don't value education. So that's where it would come into play. But usually it's across the board. And attendance problems, unfortunately, are usually occurring school avoidance for 1 to 2 years before these kids are getting treatment. And that's because it's just, we're not aware of it and the school's not aware of it. So obviously we want to intervene as soon as we see any signs. And because the schools haven't been trained on school avoidance, so they don't know what they're looking for. And as I said, unfortunately, they just group everything into truancy. So there are tons of misconceptions about school avoidance that our kids are lazy and manipulative, but obviously they're overwhelmed, they're anxious, they are stuck emotionally. They don't want to learn. Well, that's not true. Come on. We know our kids care about education. Oops, sorry, I'm not moving this. And they want to attend. They fear being away. They fear falling behind. They want to be in school. And parenting failure, this happens all the time. We also educate school districts. So we have schools fill out a form on our website when they want to be educated on school avoidance to learn about our professional development. And we always say, why? What's your biggest problem? And over 50% of the time, they blame it on the parents and say, parents are lame these days. Parents don't value education. Parents don't try. Parents aren't doing what we tell them. So it's very difficult because it becomes a blame game. And again, this is just because schools aren't educated on it. Once they are educated, they see things differently. And parents are usually proactive and they're desperate for help. And this is not truancy and defiance, which the school is very quick to label as well. This is another thing we hear from schools all the time. And I have this sometimes when I speak to a school and they're like, well, this parent, they're not doing anything to help their child. And I'm like, really? Well, where's the evidence of that? So they're like, okay, he's been seeing a therapist for years. And then I say, well, the reality is, very small amount of therapists out there actually know how to properly treat school avoidance, treat with use exposure therapy. So most likely they're getting the wrong therapy. So this is not going to fly. That's not a reason. We provide them with resources. Well, their resources they're providing with is maybe like a name of a local clinic in the area. And sometimes those clinics are not educated on school avoidance, so they really can't help. And then the one that parents hate is, well, we told the mom all she needs to do is get the child in the building and then we can do something. We can't. And then we say, we know that's the problem. That's the problem. And when they say that parents don't value education, come on. Families know that their kids are going to fall behind in life without education. And sometimes schools will say, well, we visited the home. And I say, well, how often have you visited the home? And who's gone to the home? Sometimes they're sending a police officer to the home. Like they sent to my house, the most horrible thing in the world to see a police officer in uniform marching up to your kid's bedroom. So if they're not having the right people go to your home and they know what their goal is, then they're not doing the proper interventions. So as I said, parents unfortunately often feel like failures because very small percentages of therapists out there know how to use exposure therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. Some of the research shows that the kids show that some of the barriers are they teacher relationships, which they don't feel that they have bonding teacher relationships, or the teachers really respect them and look to them like they're valued. The number of different classrooms, obviously the size of a school. And we also hear that kids who do get back to school were like, when my teachers understood and agreed that there is some acknowledge that there's something called school avoidance, and this is what I'm dealing with, it really, it changes everything when a school understands that. So the functional view of school avoidance, now they're the four functions of school avoidance. We're looking for underlying causes. So the four functions was developed by one of the leading researchers on school refusal, Dr. Christopher Carney, and of University of Las Vegas. And he developed this about 20 years ago. And so we think that either the kids are avoiding negative reinforcers or they're seeking positive reinforcers. So what exactly are those functions? So the first one is staying away, avoiding objects that make the kids feel unpleasant. And these are some samples of situations that will make the child feel that they want to avoid, like the lunchroom, feeling fearful of not keeping up with their friends, especially if they have an undiagnosed learning difference or learning difference that's not getting the proper help. The other kids at school, or not wanting to be around a particular group at school, or sensory issues. And then the next one is avoiding social evaluative situations, which is tests and reading out loud. And then the positive, seeking tangible rewards, is to receive attention from a parent or significant other. This is usually what we would call traditionally separation anxiety. And then function four is to obtain tangible rewards, seeking positive things, staying home to game, to sleep, to watch Netflix, or communicate with other kids who might be available online. And how do we figure out what function our kid is? There's something called, sorry, I got a bug in my office. There is the school refusal assessment scale. This is a Likert scale that's available. We have it on our website. You can get it on our website. And schools will use it, or clinicians will use it to help you compute the main function or cause of the school avoidance. And we have this available on our website, and we have scoring examples so you can learn how to score as well. Let's go back for a second. I do want to note that there are limitations to this. So on one hand, it's awesome because if we really don't know what's causing it, it gives us an idea what they're avoiding, or they're like seeking tangible rewards. But what happens if this is given to a child maybe after months of being out of school, definitely years, it skews the results because they're not only avoiding, they're staying home and seeking tangible rewards of their home after being at home for so long. So even Dr. Chris Carney has admitted that, it's not as useful in the later stages. Oh, and schools like it because it gives them something to hang their hat on. It gives parents something. It gives you hope that you're getting information. So I understand that. So any piece of information you can get to help your child and understand them is of value. So the first line treatments for anxiety-based school avoidance are cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy. If you're not familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, it's when we have thoughts lead to feelings, lead to our behaviors. And that usually is when kids have unhelpful thinking styles, or they have these automatic negative thoughts where they're perceiving the world negatively or differently than what's really happening. And cognitive behavioral therapy, if done right, is very strong and powerful. It helps kids reframe and challenge those mind tricks, because our minds play tricks on us. Also, exposure therapy is totally integral to anxiety-based school avoidance, to getting kids back to school. I'll talk about more of that in a second. So, sorry. So exposure therapy is when we slowly introduce kids to different levels of their fear hierarchy. So we're going to slowly let them experience the least anxiety provoking, to let them sit in it and realize that they can handle it. And then once that habit, if it's become habituated, extinct, then they can move on to the next exposure. And this is a very simplified example of an exposure hierarchy. And what we say to schools also is now schools, we're not training schools to be exposure therapists, but when you are working with a child who is school avoiding to get them back to school, we are going to use that approach and we'll call it reintegration. So the schools should, and this is what you need to advocate for, is to build a gradual reintroduction to school based on this therapeutic approach. Here's just another example. It's also important to note that every kid, as we know, is at a different level of functioning, so we have to meet the child where it's at. So some kids who have school avoidance cannot even leave their bedroom. So those kids, their first exposure might be coming downstairs. Their first exposure might be leaving the home. Their first exposure might be speaking to a cashier if they have social anxiety. So it's not necessarily level of the kids functioning is to start that exposure hierarchy. This is also a really powerful tool that explains that we think or our kids feel that anxiety is just going to keep skyrocketing and just never go away. It's going to increase. But with exposure therapy, we see that it will be reduced more and more over a period of time. I'm sorry, over a certain amount of time, the anxiety will dissipate and relax a little bit. And this is what exposure therapy does to a kid. It lessens that fear response and it lets them be able to sit in it, and it reduces the anxiety quicker to move on to their next exposure. I've had families who actually show this to their kids in the parking lot when they can't get them out of the car to explain this to them as psychoeducation. And they also might go back to this exposure hierarchy and talk about their subjective units of distress. Really, it's just your anxiety level on a scale of 1 to 10. You know, where is your anxiety level now? And sometimes it might dissipate or lower as the child's sitting in your car. Sometimes it won't. So the learning theory behind exposure therapy is it desensitizes you, then it becomes habituated and we extincted, and then we have emotional reprocessing, and then the child has self-efficacy because they realize that they can handle this exposure and then move on to the next. And this is what breaks them out of that anxiety, fear, avoidance cycle. And it's a very powerful tool that works. Now, it doesn't always work, especially if it's not done correctly. I didn't realize that when I sent him to one of the best clinics for anxiety, and they were doing supposedly exposure therapy with my son. But after the fact, when I spoke to all these other people, they're like, well, they were supposed to be doing the exposures with your child. If you have your own therapist, that is value. They should be doing it with your child. They can't expect a child to be doing these things on their own and reporting back to them. So when you are interviewing people as a therapist, you want to ask them, tell me about your exposure therapy. How do you do that? Will you be doing the exposures with my kid? Are you going to send him home? I mean, yes, the kids get homework, but it should be started and worked on with the therapist first. And obviously, we know that not every kid has the ability to access a mental health professional. We know that's a huge problem in the country. So therefore, we have to teach our schools that we need to use this approach to help our kids get back to school. One of the biggest problems we hear from families is the constant battle between the school and the parent for an IEP or a 504 plan. This is what it feels like. So that is one of the biggest problems. If schools don't understand school avoidance, first of all, it's very difficult. We need to educate them. And then they don't necessarily understand how to interpret the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or Section 504 as it is through the lens of school avoidance. So we have to help them. So that's why a lot of the times parents, and we hear this, we have a Facebook group of thousands of families, and this happens all the time. They're like, well, the school says I don't qualify. Okay, so for a 504 plan, just to reiterate it really quickly, and you don't have to take notes because we have on our website a guide that I'll direct you to after that explains everything very simply. But if a child has a physical and mental impairment that substantially limits one major life activity, And that is, if they're not learning, if they're not in school, they are not learning, they're not socializing. And if that is keeping them from accessing their education, they are entitled to a 504 plan. So the schools have to, you might have to re-educate them very kindly. These are these are the life activities that are defined through 504. And for kids with school avoidance, it could be any of these situations. And I'm assuming that for a kid with ADHD, maybe it might even be concentrating, thinking, sleeping. I don't know, you guys would tell me if they would qualify under under any of the other life activities. And for an IEP, also, most kids with school avoidance do qualify for an IEP. So this is something we have to advocate for. So, child must be found to have one of the 13 characteristics of special education or 13 characteristics of a disability, which you see here a listing of them. And a lot of them for kids with school avoidance, they might not even have a learning disability, but they have, well, we hate this term, I'm sorry, emotional disturbance. It is so antiquated. Some states have removed that language and they call it emotional disorder, or mental health challenge, or behavioral health. But that is really upsetting when parents go to an IEP. I had this, and I fought them for the IEP for so long. And when they finally had me sign it and said because of an emotional disturbance, I was crying. I'm like, my kid's not emotionally disturbed. You know, it's such a horrible connotation. Well, anyway, that's just a sidetrack. But so any of these 13 characteristics, and it must be adversely affecting their educational performance. So if they're not going to school, they're not learning, they're not socializing, and by reason needs special education and related services. So what I didn't understand, and most people don't understand, is that special education is not just what you thought in the years ago. A resource room or a private, separate room for kids who have issues. Special education also relates to related services. So for school avoidance, obviously counseling would be very powerful. For schools, psychoeducation, we also give schools when they buy our professional development to educate their staff, we give them our School Avoidance Master Class for families, which is psychoeducation to educate the family as well. So the family understands, the school understands, and it's the best of both worlds. Study skills course. This sometimes schools will call it a resource room, study skills. And basically what it is, it's a room with a special education teacher and a few other kids who have IEPs, and they are there, and that special education is there to give them extra assistance. And they might help the kids have extended test times in that class. They may let the kids take their tests in that class. They will help them organize their work. And the greatest service is when the school can go the extra mile and have that special education teacher help organize your child's daily load in terms of working with the different teachers and going over this with the student every day to make sure they're keeping the kid on track and making sure that the staff is not overwhelming the child. Co-op classes, when the kids do get back to school, are also very important. It's when there is, and they're called different things in different states, districts. It's when there's a special education teacher in the class with the general education, and the kids, no one knows who that extra teacher is. They don't know it's a special education teacher who's there to actually give extra help and pay attention and help kids with IEPs. The kids just think it's a teacher's assistant. And, they don't say, oh, and, Mrs. Demsky, she's our special education teacher. They just say she's not the teacher. This is very valuable to a kid who needs extra help. And these special education teachers also go out of the way to take care of our kids with tests and modifications and accommodations and making sure they are being followed through. And executive functioning skills obviously are really important. And I've yet to see a school that's told me that they actually give executive functioning skills and classes. So I'm dying to find out about that. I did finally find out from one online school called Bridgemont Academy, which is in a number of states, that they actually have a whole executive functioning skills class, but I've never heard of it in a school district, which obviously makes no sense. So when we talk about understanding your rights, in terms of 504s and IEPs, and making sure that regardless of your child's disability, school avoidance, your child still, um, they're supposed to have a free, appropriate public education regardless of the disability. So every state has what's called this guide over here on your left and on your right. Those are procedural safeguards. This is a description for that state, at Section 504 IEP, how to qualify, the different timelines, because when you put in writing a request for an evaluation for an IEP, that's why it's really important to put in writing and document it. The clock starts. So the school has to reply to you within a certain time frame to let you know if they're going to evaluate. If they are going to evaluate, they have to evaluate your child within a certain time frame, and then they have to give you a decision within a specific time frame. So this is very important to understand your rights. Each state has their own guide. Most states follow the same rules, but some states are a little bit out there, and they go a little bit beyond. And so you should always look for your state's procedural safeguards, because that overrides federal law. Oh, and this in the middle, this is a great resource that we put together. It is, sorry, I'm seeing an error here on my slide. It is a guide for free that we give to you on our website that explains special education, disability law in the simplest of terms. Because for years, when I was going through this, I read everything. I still couldn't understand what the heck an IEP was, how you qualify for it. Finally, we wrote a guide on what it means and how to qualify through the lens of school avoidance. It's very simple language. So if you go to our website, schoolavoidance.org, under resources, click Ultimate Guide, this will definitely help you understand your rights. Accommodations and modifications. I have this slide here not to go through every accommodation modification, but to let you know that your child doesn't need a 504 plan or an IEP for them to start modifying and accommodating your child, whether it is changing their attendance schedule, reducing their class load. There's nothing in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that says a school can't do that from the get-go. Now, schools, they used to call them response to intervention teams. Now they call them MTSS. So the multi-tiered systems of support team. So these people need to be educated. They don't need to hold on to these accommodations and modifications so strongly. It's in everyone's best interest to help our kids as soon as possible without those other resources. So you should ask for them, even though you don't have a 504 or an IEP. Now, the difference again between the 504 and the IEP is that the IEP has services attached to it and other safeguards. But I just want to let you know that even though I'm showing you some accommodations and modifications, this list is not exhaustive. So people sometimes will say, well, give me a list of accommodations, modifications, and the school might even give you a list, but it doesn't mean that that's it. You can ask for whatever the heck you want, and they can't say to you, oh, we've never done that before, or whatever. You can ask for whatever you want. And we list all these accommodations and modifications for you on a blog on our website under it says accommodations and modifications to look at more ones that work for school avoidance. So setting your kid up for success, obviously you want to get therapeutic support. If you can bring them to a mental health provider, obviously you want to see if there's underlying causes, a mental health issue. It's really important to build connections with the school. Parent-school collaboration and early intervention are the best predictors of success for getting kids with school avoidance back to school. So if our school is not collaborating with us, it's really difficult. So we have to explain to schools what we need in a very kind way, because they don't like to be told what to do, but a collaborative way. And this is what you've read all about school avoidance. This is what works, because you do want to find someone who maybe is the champion for your child, someone who can start building a bridge to your child through text, or if they can do home visits, to reconnect with your child, someone who they feel safe with and trust. And they don't even have to talk about academics. This is just about building back safe relationships. So if we can find a champion and we can find out who is our caseworker, we want to know who that is at the school. And we want to keep on working with the school, because sometimes what happens is the school will just forget about the kid who's out of school. They have a million things going on. They can't remember every kid. So we are going to have to be the squeaky wheel and say, hey, this is what I want to meet with you. This is what I think we should do. What do you think? So unfortunately, you got to be the squeaky wheel. It's just the only way to get things done in this lifetime, especially with schools. The educators now, they are so busy. They hardly have any time to breathe. So it's almost like you've got to spoon feed it to them and make it easy for them. And again, the school resources, we want a point person. If it's the 504 person, the special education child study team. And we also want to have a person who's going to meet our kid and bring them into the school building if we are bringing them back into school. And we want to build a plan. So if it's not the 504 plan or the IEP plan, there has to be some way to reintegrate your kid back to school. So make sure that language is in your IEP or 504. And if it's not, make sure they were working on a plan concurrent with those instruments. So it's really important for parents to show their kids that they are on their sides. And I had a wonderful therapist explain this to me, that you as a parent have to make it to your child, tell your child, like, you guys are in the trenches, in the war together. You are together and you're fielding those landmines. And that's what you're going to do for your child. You are going to advocate for your child. You understand that they are dealing with an issue and that you are going to work with them and to help them and get them what they need. So a great sentence, which the therapists always say, is, I see you're anxious right now. I get it. And that's hard. But I believe you have the power to handle that type of feeling and you will get through it. I have the confidence in you. I've heard this from different therapists along the way, and I say, really, does that really work? They say, you know what? If you keep repeating that, it does rewrite the messaging in the kid's head. So those are very powerful statements that I believe you can handle it. Because I've also heard on the other side that sometimes parents, and I was guilty of this, you are walking on eggshells. You're so scared to say something wrong to your child that you're bending over backwards and you're enabling the anxiety, and that you're stepping in to do everything for them, like you're stepping in to talk for them and do everything for them. Then the child just feels like, wow, maybe my parent doesn't believe I can really do it, and they're just doing everything. So it's a fine line, but it's really important. These are some other parenting strategies. No arguing. We are not going to try to convince the child in the heat of the moment. They are in fight or flight. We can't rationalize with them in that moment. You can go back and see if they've calmed down and try it, but not at that moment. No bribing. We want to express validation. And if escape is part of the treatment plan, also, this is important. It could actually help as one of your accommodations to have somewhere in the school, some person in the school building the child feels safe with, to have a pass to leave for a few minutes, to escape, to go to that person's room. And I said to the therapist, really, aren't they going to, I'm sorry, they said to the therapist, aren't they going to just take advantage of this? And he said, you know what? You'd be so surprised. The kid might use it once or twice. And then they just knowing it's there is that comfort that they are not stuck. A lot of kids fear they're going to have a panic attack in the classroom. So knowing that is a possibility. And I've heard this from kids, I've interviewed them, and they said, just knowing this is a big help. And they don't say, once you go into school, you'll feel fine, because that's not the truth. They are going to feel some anxiety. They're going to learn how to handle it. So we don't want to say things that really are not true. And as I said, research in real life, best predictors, early interventions, parent-school collaboration. Early interventions are very hard for schools to achieve because most are not educated on school avoidance. They don't know what they're looking for, and they might not even necessarily know how to help you. So you need to intervene early if you see the signs, and you need to lead the charge for advocating for your child with your school. And this is my son now. That was him at the beginning when he was 13. He is now 28 years old, and this is him at his high school graduation. I never thought this day would happen. So obviously, it's just a miracle. Not a miracle. I mean, I worked hard to make it happen. And then this is him and his girlfriend, and they live on their own. And this is my cutie last year. And everyone says, going, what's your kid doing now? And I hate to say it, but he's normal. He's normal. You would never know this kid went through school avoidance. He went out to college. He has a career that he loves. He has friends. He's independent. He's his own health insurance. So I have to say to families, there is hope. And when you're going through it, it really is hard to believe that your child will get out of it, but it's possible. It really is possible. And that is the end to my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm just leaving this up here about our website or resources if you want to look at it. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jayne, thank you so much. Thank
Wow.
you.
Wow. Actually, I have to tell you, the presentation was incredible, and
That's so nice.
your delivery. It's like, as an ADDer myself, I was hanging on every word.
That's so nice. Thank
That's
you,
the
Andrea. I
biggest
appreciate
compliment.
that.
That's the
Thank
biggest
you.
compliment from one
Thank
AD.
you.
Jayne, I'm curious. I know you said your book was coming out soon. Can you maybe tell us what additional chapters, information might be in there?
Thank you. Yes, it is important to note that our School Avoidance Master Class and everything on our website is awesome, but I was able to expand on it through this book because I interviewed, well, not only do I have much more experience now, and I've been speaking to families and educators every day, I know what's going on. I interviewed 11 experts for the book. So this Dr. Chris Carney, the 4 functions of school avoidance, he let me interview him. I interviewed leading therapists who are leaders in helping kids with school avoidance get back to school. I interviewed a special education attorney, and he was anonymous because he's a special education attorney representing school districts. So he could not speak against them. So he's anonymous in my book. I also have someone, are you familiar with SPACE, Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions? It's all about reducing accommodations. The website's called SpaceNet or Space. It's by Dr. Eli Leibowitz from Yale University. And we had a space therapist do a whole chapter on that, and other professionals talk about how parents can reduce accommodations. And that's not the accommodations in school. That's how we might give air to the anxiety and step in and overcompensate for the anxiety in our kids. So that's a very powerful. That's a very powerful chapter. Also, we talk all about working with the school, who to reach out to, because it really is confusing. We talk about first line treatments. I interviewed a child with a neurodivergent kid with autism who had school avoidance, and he gave me great information, his mom. And then I interviewed 2 therapists who specialize in autism to get their information. So it really has, sorry to go on and on and on, but it really is awesome information. And there really is nothing else out there because this covers not only the therapeutic piece, but working with the school, and the special education piece, which is not out there. So sorry to go on and on.
No, really. And I feel that we as ADHD coaches, like we know a lot, but you have touched on things that I have never been exposed to before. So
Oh,
thank you.
sweet. I hope it helped anyone out there today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at jane@schoolavoidance.org. I'm on TikTok, which is so uncomfortable. Facebook, you can find us.
Jayne, I have a question for you. Do you have any, maybe like a list of advocates that can go into the school with the parents? Because it's so daunting when the parents walk into the school and they're sitting at a table with a team of the school's experts. So, and they're so vulnerable, right? And it's such a charged issue for them. They care so deeply. And there's this, it seems to be like a combative nature just
It is.
intrinsically, and there
It's
doesn't
really
need to be, but in order to not do that. So is there a list of advocates that could go in with them?
Yeah, so there is a website called COPA, COPAA. I forget what it's called, what it stands for. It's advocates. It's special educational advocates and special education attorneys. They have a list, but
Great.
it's not a huge list, so I have to say. And it's been my dream to get a directory on our website, but I don't have someone who I don't who has I have to hire another person to do that. We are not there yet, but because it's asked every day. So I would, I would Google um, educational advocate, and then when I interview them, I really would want to know if they have experience with school avoidance, if they have a relationship with the school, if they understand school avoidance and special education disability law through that lens. We really have to vet them properly. And sometimes it's so far gone that after the educational advocate, or even because it's just gotten out of control, we unfortunately have to bring in a special education attorney, which I know really sucks. But sometimes it's the only thing to move the needle. So,
Right, right.
Jane, I
Absolutely.
see you have a question from Lauren. My daughter is in first. I fought to get her an IEP last year. She is school avoidance. The school offered to send the school psychologist to come outside the house every Wednesday. Would that be appropriate for the school psychologist to do?
of course, wow, that's amazing to get a school with that level of help. Really, I would like to I would speak to the psychologist first and have a conversation with that person to make sure that they understand school avoidance. If they're a school psychologist, how can they not? But that is you're very lucky. I would take them up on that. Sorry, I gotta take off my sweater. I'm really hot.
That is a great point, Jane, to talk first to the psychologist to make sure that it's somebody that the parent feels understands. Because, right, there are so many people in those positions that actually don't get it, which is why the schools aren't getting it. So,
Yeah,
there is a
it's
big
important.
piece, yeah, making sure that you're hearing, like, as the parent, educating yourself so you know what questions to be asking,
Yes,
right? And then being in a position where sometimes the parent needs to be the fiercest advocate and needs to be educating the school in a way, like you said, that's not a combative way, but it's in a way where, let me show you what the research says. Let me show you what works for my child at home.
yeah.
So you make
Yeah,
it
and I would also say, like, I would frame it in the way of, I want to make your life easier. I know you have a million things going on. I read all this. Can we look at this? What do you think? Because they are overwhelmed. So really, we got to make it easy for them. So most schools are open to it. Obviously, if they're combative and difficult and toxic, maybe not. But, and in that situation, if you have a school district who is not willing to work with you after all the tries, I mean, that this is not the right place for your kid. And there's no use trying to, fit a square peg in a round hole for these kids after you've tried everything. So luckily there are a lot of alternatives out there these days and a lot of alternative schools and even sometimes school districts in their own district have a school, an alternative school. They don't necessarily tell you that. So you might have to ask them or even go online and Google it. And sometimes they can actually send you to an alternative school in another district. So
a lot of schools do have that. Yeah,
yeah.
And
absolutely.
if you had to say, I'm sorry, Johnny,
No, go ahead.
from your own experience, what would you say is the greatest takeaway? Like if you had to share one tidbit.
Yes. It is to educate yourself on school avoidance because the school, unfortunately, most of them, unless they've been educated by us or someone else wonderful out there about school avoidance, and they really don't understand it. And you need to understand it. So you need to ask, but you need to know what to ask for. Because usually, like, you go into a meeting, you'd be like, okay, what can you do for my child? But they don't know. So you need to know what to tell them. And you're going to have to keep advocating and you need to understand your right to a free, appropriate public education. So, and don't get overwhelmed. We really make it easy for you on our website, our guide, and our master class. We encapsulate everything because it is really overwhelming. I spent years doing research while I was going through this with my son and never found all the deep, real answers that I really needed. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm wondering, are there any other questions out there? Please feel free. I see smiles.
I think we're done then.
You're a wealth of knowledge, Miss Jane, a wealth of knowledge.
That's so kind. Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Thank
was
you.
so nice presenting to your group. Again, I think the world of you. I love your support groups. I can't recommend them enough. You guys taught me how to do a support group, so thank you.
Jane,
You're welcome.
also, just to throw it out there, because you're doing the educational piece, we also do teacher support groups for teachers. So if you
Oh,
have
really?
any, yeah, the third
I can
Wednesday,
refer you to people.
I'm sorry?
You do teacher support groups. Oh, to send our teachers to
Yeah. So
Yes.
for
on the third
ADHD.
Wednesday of every month, if
Oh,
teachers
that's good.
want to complain, vent, ask questions,
Wow, that's
and
awesome. Well, send me a link or something that I can send them that's easy, and I can send it out.
sure, chadbergencounty.org.
Okay,
And
thank
for
you.
all of the parents on here, it's something to think about for your teachers to send information for our teacher groups to attend the teacher once a month. Teachers can come and get information about ADHD and neurodivergent thinkers and support for what to do in the classroom because the teachers are struggling in the classroom too, right? So I wouldn't as parents, this is one of the things that you can also do to help your child. Try and push the teachers towards educating themselves about ADHD and school avoidance.
Jane, I
Well,
can't thank you enough, really.
Thank you guys. So nice being here tonight. Thank